Hello, this is Dr. Dave Maslag talking about reciprocity.com. The E is spelled with a 3. I'm a professor of innovation strategy and entrepreneurship, and I'm trying to create this sharing economy proofreading platform so that you can get all of the feedback as well as skills and wonder available so that you can become very, very prolific and be amazing scholars and writers. In this particular video, I really want to talk about one particular threat to internal validity. So I'm going to get into what exactly I mean by internal validity. And then I'm going to get into this particular threat to internal validity, which is repeated testing. Comes up from time to time. And it's something that is a real concern. So one thing that I should put a caveat is, although I'm trying to be as helpful as I possibly can with this particular internal threat to validity, it's something that doesn't come up nearly as much in my own research. So I'm kind of a little bit murky here, but I'm going to try to help you out as much as I possibly can. So what I'm going to do is talk about what is a threat to internal validity, then get into what is repeated testing and why is that a threat, and then finally get into maybe some recommendations that you can possibly use or possibly try out. So what is a threat to internal validity? Again, this is a series. I have a whole series of videos about different threats to internal validity and what is reliability and stuff like that. So you can look at that. It also explains why I'm trying to create this proofreading platform and why it's so important. So what is a threat to internal validity? So if you have a research design, you're a researcher or an experimentalist or somebody that's out there that's doing something in a research mindset, you want to be able to create a hypothesis, test some sort of hypothesis, and then get results based on this particular test. Now, the farther that the test, so you might get some results from that particular test. Now, the farther that test is from being able to conclusively conclude that the results that you have are due to the sort of experimental setup or the design that you have, compared to just random chance or correlations or something like that. The farther that is, the more a larger threat to internal validity that you actually have. So there are some designs that have many different kinds of threats to internal validity. Some of them are really, really robust, and they don't have a lot of threats to internal validity, like a randomized controlled trial with repeatedly assigning to multiple people and doing a lot of maybe having different treatment groups and stuff, like just having you could do all sorts of crazy things that are amazing and interesting in terms of research design, and I'm not going to get into those in those particular videos. I just want to get into these threats at this particular moment. So this particular threat, repeated testing, this is essentially where, from my understanding, this is where the experimenter repeatedly tests the same subjects with the same experiment, and they repeatedly test over time. And essentially what happens is that the subjects or the people or the things, the organizations, maybe the teams that you're testing on, they eventually learn what you are testing them, and they start learning over time, and they start anticipating the different results and different questions and the different answers to those particular questions. And then from there, they start answering in the way that they think that is going to be, that's going to happen, right? So the more that you're sort of doing repeated testing, the more that you sample the same people over and over again, the more likely that they're going to learn those particular results or learn the particular test. And now what's happening instead, it's not the hypothesized test, it's not the test that you're looking for, the results are not due to the particular test, but due instead to the subjects actually learning what you are doing. They're kind of really anticipating what's going on behind the scenes with the experimentalist. Now, this can be somewhat of an issue in terms of mitigation. What I would recommend is, of course, you can try to mitigate as much as possible by not giving the test to the same people multiple times. And what you can do is get multiple groups and do what's called a cross-subject sort of design instead of within-subject design, where you're looking at across multiple subjects to see if they're... So basically, many people are getting the test only once, and so they can't really... or the treatment only once, so they can't really learn any of the, they can't learn anything that you're giving them. The other way that you can do it is make sure that there's a long enough time gap between when you test. So maybe you're doing it within subjects, so you're testing the same person over and over and over again, or the same company over and over again, or the same team over and over again. Maybe what you do is you have a long enough period of time between when you initially tested them and maybe give them a couple of months, maybe even 6 months, and maybe even a year, and you retest them using the same thing, the same test procedure that you did, and hopefully they'll be able to forget, or they will forget the test that you gave them. Most often with some sort of survey design, for example, they're going to test, or they're going to forget most of the questions that they get. But there's still, even if you wait 6 months, somebody that has a really good memory might remember some of the questions and answer in the same sort of way. So if you're trying to get maybe a test of reliability, for example, of your organization, how it's sort of maybe it's not your organization, or maybe it's an individual measure, and you're trying to look to see it, how well that they how reliable they are in this particular construct, then it probably doesn't, you might have a slight threat to internal validity, but it's pretty small at that moment with a longer time horizon. Now you can sort of create designs. You might be able to create a particular research design that sort of navigates that completely by making, I don't know, I'm not sure how you would do it off the top of my head in terms of making sure that there is you just want to maybe create some sort of sneaky way of, it's not quite manipulation, but maybe some way that that you're looking at something behind the scenes, rather than being very explicit with them. One thing that I've seen before, I've heard of before, is you give sort of a tricky question that can go either way in what you're measuring, instead of the responses that they get. You're measuring instead the length of time that they actually do sort of think through that particular problem. And that is one way to measure, maybe that's the sort of sneaky way of something that you're measuring, right? So you're not directly getting at that particular thing. And you can get at something sort of indirectly that way. That's a really nice way, especially with now that you have sort of what's called metadata, that you're recording all sorts of things that are going on with the test design or the test. You might be able to tap into some of those things. Now, the other thing that you can do as well, you can design it out somehow with those particular suggestions, right? So maybe you just test the one test on one individual, or you don't repeat the same test on the same individual. You give enough time between them so they forget. Maybe you do some sort of look at the metadata, for example. The other thing that you can maybe do is that you hypothesize that there might be some sort of repeated testing, some learning that's going on, right? So you hypothesize a learning effect, and that might capture some of that you're going to suggest that there's going to be some sort of learning that's going on. Now, it might be a little bit tricky at that moment because you're not sure what you're capturing, but if you can maybe capturing the learning effect, that's kind of interesting, right? That could be a really cool study as well. And then the last but not least is, okay, so you ran all of this stuff, right? You ran it, and then maybe a reviewer or somebody, a colleague, pointed out that you have this particular internal threat to validity, this repeated testing threat to internal validity. Well, what can you do? Well, maybe you put it in the limitation section as a possibility, but you might be able to rule it out maybe by doing like a logistical regression between the two, predicting, what is the probability of that occurring between the two. I'm not sure at this moment, and it's a little bit of a stretch, but you might be able to do something like that to make sure that there is not any problems with that. I'm sure that there is some clever paper out there that has looked at that, but I'm just not sure at this moment. So if anybody has suggestions, they could put it in the comments for sure. But yeah, that's basically it. And really what I'm trying to do with these particular videos, and the reason why I'm actually doing the reciprocity project, is that there's a really cool thing that's going on in the software industry. It's called the A/B testing, where you can actually test various different results. You can have a treatment and control group, and it's a really, really rigorous procedure that goes on behind the scenes in terms of implementing software. And it is basically randomized controlled trials on software, and I'm trying to actually, at least part of it, actually build this into the reciprocity platform, that you can get some really valid and robust results in terms of understanding behavior and stuff like that, as well as trying to help out graduate students with what I'm trying to do. So the idea is, and maybe it's never going to happen, right? So the idea is to create enough videos, create enough content, have this platform that it starts actually generating revenue. I'd like to actually recoup my costs in terms of development, but then B, eventually, if it ever becomes profitable, I'd like to actually start giving graduate scholarships and stuff like that out to people using from some of the money that's actually created here. So it's a really cool, fun thing to be able to do that and be part of that. So that's it, right? So if you want to watch some of the other videos about threats to internal validity, I put them out every Wednesday. It's part of my Nerd Out Wednesday series. It's all about me just being a total nerd in science, and I talk about anything that I find interesting in science and different topics and stuff like that. So thank you so much. Have a good day, and I appreciate you following me all the way to the end. Bye.